Hey, what's up, everybody? After playing this game for a while, I thought it would be helpful to y'all if I did a quick tutorial video on the things I wish I had known when I started playing Conflict of Nations World War III. There's some tutorials out there, not a whole lot, but there's some guys out there that do some good work walking you through, what the different units do and different strategies and tactics. But I thought it'd be helpful to hear from somebody who's fairly new to the game, who's played, I think I'm on like game 6, and just to kind of figure out the game. I haven't done any of the crazy stuff yet, but I feel like I figured it out this game. I'm playing a guy who's really good. This dude here is level 68, I think, which that's really high rank for this game. And I'm absolutely smoking him right now. And I think I'll be okay, because I can't see what he has over here, but I looked at his economy and I think we'll be okay. But I just thought I would throw in here maybe a 30-minute video going over the variety of things that I wish I had known before I started playing. Before I dive in, if you're new to the channel, or this is a game that's new to you and you weren't aware of and now you're interested in it, please go ahead and leave a like, or if you want, subscribe to the channel if you find this video informational. It obviously helps other people find the channel. But let's dive right in. So first and foremost, you can play the game on real-time speed or 4x speed. And when you go in to pick a game, you'll see it say, 4x speed. I have not done 4x speed yet because I have a busy life. It's harder to do that. And so what this game literally does is minute for minute, it's real time. Now, the downside to that is if you've got like a busy day or like overnight, there's a lot of things that can happen in a, like say, a 12-hour period, for example. Whereas 4x speed, obviously even more could happen in a 12-hour time frame, but you're at least a little bit better able to micromanage the events as they unfold. Whereas the real time things are pretty slow. But I think the slow speed to start is the way to go, because it really gives you a chance to think through the game, think through what is happening as it's happening, react to it accordingly, and just really kind of learn the game for a while. So I've been playing for 3 or 4 months now, and I've had a couple games going on at any given time. Number 2, I'd say start on this map, which is the Americas map. I forget the specific name to it, but it's a great starters map. What you'll find what happens, which is a bit frustrating, but it is what it is. Most people quit either early in the game or kind of mid game, but you will have a handful of people stick around. Now, in my case, up until recently, we had a couple people. I think they saw the writing on the wall that it was really me and North Carolina that were left, so they quit. So it's me and North Carolina going at it. But the reason I say that it's not altogether bad that a lot of people quit the game is it gives you the chance to really learn it and play through it instead of constantly getting knocked out, early or mid game and not really feeling out the whole game. So right now, mid game, I'm like day 24. And I could tell you, if everybody kept playing and you're new to it, you don't know how to build units, you don't know how to like protect yourself, you'd probably get eliminated pretty quickly, pretty often, because you don't really need pretext for war in this game. You just declare war. I mean, that's how it works. So I even say, try and get in a coalition, especially first couple games. I'm doing this one solo. I did it solo. It was pretty tough at first, actually, because this guy right here was spending a bunch of his actual money, this gold up here, which you can get with actual money, to build up his army really fast. And then on top of that, I had a guy to my north that was aggressive, and then Texas was kind of coming on me. So it was pretty hairy for a while. The last couple games I've played, I actually formed coalitions with a couple of my border folks. But this one I did solo. But I'd say do a coalition in your first couple games. The way you do that is you either go to the coalition tab and create one. Who is this guy? Colorado? Yeah, he's not even playing anymore. I don't think he is. Anyways, the way you do it is just look for people who are active. And the way you do that is you just look for people expanding their borders pretty quickly. And then just hit them up in the message tab under diplomacy. Just go to them. Like if I wanted to reach out to this guy, you can send him a direct message. Just be like, hey, you want to form an alliance? You want to form a coalition? Friends. And if they're active, they'll see it and they'll get back to you. And that's honestly on this map, probably the best way to win is form a coalition of like 3 folks, and most of the time the other side is not going to form a coalition of their own, and you'll be able to kind of stomp through. Very first thing you should do in this game is with your homelands. So before I get to this really quick, pick a state or a country, whatever, that has on this map, for example, 6 or more cities. Okay, so on this map, you could start off with, like, for example, Haiti, which I've actually played and won as, which is crazy. 5 cities, but you're on an island, so you got to actually build a navy. There's even some states that I think only have 4 cities. For Mexico, I start off with 7. And that is enormously important, and here's why. Your homeland cities make a boatload of manufactured goods every day. So, for example, here in... So I'm not even pronouncing it because guys making fun of me, but we're making almost 3,000 supplies a day, and then 2,300 cash, and then 368 manpower. Now, obviously, that's with boosted arms industries, which these boost up this right here. But compare that to an occupied city like here, only at 435 supply a day. So occupied cities, obviously, by themselves aren't really all that great. Now, in the aggregate, if you have a whole bunch of occupied cities, which I do, all these are occupied down here. Occupied means cities that I did not start with, that I had to conquer. So I started off with these 2 guys here. They're occupied cities. And then I worked my way down here, and then I went back north. So in the aggregate, that obviously helps me. But individually, they don't really do a whole lot. Now, I could, for example, here, it's making 435 a day. I could improve that with an arms industry, but notice how expensive an arms industry is. And it only is going to boost it by 10%. So not very impressive. Whereas, 10% of, say, 2,000, obviously much better, right? So just know that there's a difference between occupied cities, your homeland cities, and really the way to go is annexing occupied cities. So I have annexed Peral, Monclova, and Kingman. He only annexed 1, which I just conquered, by the way. So he started off with 6 cities. I started off with 7. I've annexed 3. He annexed 1. So I've got 10 cities that are big, buku producing stuff over here, which are producing even more as I build out these arms industries. Now, the downside to annexing is it's incredibly expensive. So you can't do it early game. Well, early game. But you want to try and do it as soon as possible, right? Because as soon as you annex it, you're reaping the benefits of that for that longer of a period of time throughout the game, right? So if I annex on day 5 and I end the game in day 30, I've gotten 25 days of benefit from that city, as opposed to waiting until like day 20 and then only getting like 9 days, for example, of benefit from that annexing of the city. But as you can see here, we get 1,100 production versus, 435. But in order to annex a city, very expensive. So 4,200 supply, 3,700 components, 1,500 rares, 1,700 electronics. And to put that into perspective, look how much we make an hour, which these are really good numbers for day 24, considering the size of the army that I have and the Air Force that I have, because all your units also have maintenance costs. But just put that in perspective, right? So it can be very difficult to decide, okay, I need to keep researching, I need to keep building buildings and troops, but then I also need to save up for annexing. How do I do it? And there's really no really good answer. The best that I can say is, when you think you're at that point where you have a big enough army and Air Force to protect you from aggression, maybe that's where you ramp up and annex and build up your economy and so forth, right? More experienced players perhaps have a better answer to that than I do. Again, please in the comments section include any sort of inputs that you might have. But annexing is really important. Occupied cities, they're whatever, whatever. What is interesting though is, for example, you only get like I said before, a 10% bonus from arms industry in cities. But if I were to go over here to this land area that also has supply, makes 126. But if I put local industry here, I get 100%, which which is kind of crazy. Now, I haven't done the math, honestly, to figure out if it's worth it to put these here versus in the city, because you do earn a little bit less, right? So I only have like 126 versus the 435. So it might be cheaper to build out these arms industries, even though they cost, more stuff than here. But just know that there is a difference here. You get 100% from these local industries on these little land tiles versus cities. Please don't, by the way, I've seen people do this. Don't build military infrastructure or military logistics early game. Honestly, I did that in my first game. It's hella stupid. Don't do it. It's expensive early game. This is actually a lot early game because you need to connect these to different tiles. And yeah, they do speed your troops up, but like for the cost to go, say, from this city to this city to build like a road network, for example, 4 tiles, I could have built a couple units out of that. So don't waste your time on construction on land tiles early game, unless it's maybe an airfield because you need to extend your air force, which I'll show you in a moment, or like I did, combat outposts. So like I was saying before, this guy was going to be super aggressive. So I built in 2 solid areas, a forest tile and a mountain tile, these defensive works, these combat outposts, which give me, I take 33% less damage, and they're fairly cheap to make and fast to make. And I only had level 1. And I put those here. And then when he attacked me, he like went right into it. So it worked out in my favor. So that's where these land tiles are good for, is strategically using them in certain circumstances. In some cases, grabbing these for the resources, and also for intelligence, right? So for example, up here, I just took Atlanta, and I have a fighter jet here. That's why I can see this region right here. But like over here, it's all fog of war. So what I'm doing is I have my guys going out and I'm taking over all these little tiles while I sleep, because I'm about to go to bed here actually after I finish this recording. And when I get up in the morning, assuming he hasn't attacked me, I'll have all this territory, which means that if he comes in to attack me, it'll be like a tripwire. I'll be able to see him coming and somewhat act accordingly. That's why I have my guys going in the rear here too, is just creating some buffer for me, so I have some room to maneuver. It also means he can't see what I have, right? Because if I have these tiles conquered, I can fly my jets over them and he won't be able to see my jets. Whereas right now he can see my fighter jet because I'm over his area. So it's good for intel purposes. Another example is over here. I pushed out a little bit away from Albuquerque towards Colorado Springs. This was back when I was at war with him. And I did that so that if he came across from Colorado Springs down, it'd be like a tripwire to tell me, hey, he's coming, because up here in the information tab, it'll tell me if someone's getting into my land space, and then I could respond accordingly if I wanted to. Okay. All right. So the first thing you should do with your home tiles is build these barracks, build a army barracks in all of your home tiles, and build a recruiting office in all of your home tiles. That's what I recommend. The reason is if you don't do that and your neighbor does do that, chances are they're going to overwhelm you within the first few days of the game if they want to. Okay. So I say do that first. And then a good kind of early composition that I've seen works pretty well is if you go with either motorized or mechanized, pick one or the other. These guys are cheaper. You can build them in more mass production. They're a good kind of staple to anyone's army. These guys are a little bit more expensive. They use components more components as opposed to supplies. But they're really good they're better against mechanized, and they're good in urban warfare. They couple well with battle tanks, which I'll get into in a moment. But build a couple of these guys with one recon tank. So like 2 infantry and a recon tank, and that tends to make a good composition. And if you make like 4 or 5 of those, you'll find that you're performing pretty well. And then what you do once you build those guys up is either take out a weak neighbor who didn't do that, right? Like if you look at your neighbor, and for example, like I go up here to like Kansas, and I'm like, oh, you have 1 barracks. Don't have anything there. You have like 1 barracks and 1 airport, dude. Okay. I now know that I can outmuscle you early game within like a couple days, right? So with all my barracks, I build up those infantry, I build up those recon tanks, and then I move out on you immediately. Another good early game unit that I recommend you probably go with. This game I did not, because I wanted to kind of see what it was like. And there was definitely a window where I was very vulnerable to air, is the mobile anti-aircraft vehicle. This is a great early game vehicle because it does damage to infantry and tanks as well. And then it also provides you some protection against air. It's relatively cheap to build. You can get it on day one. And I would just say put it in each one of your stacks, your battle stacks, until you're finally at that point in your economy where you can transition over to SAMs. SAMs are great. I mean, I have absolutely smoked his Air Force because of my SAMs, but I didn't have SAMs I did not have any air protection except for my fighters early game. And I have found in previous games that you can't just exclusively rely on fighter jets to provide you air protection, because unless you're micromanaging them. And I think only in like 4 times play, that's really kind of doable. But yeah, so early game, or really first thing, that's what I recommend you do. And then when you get to a point, and then figure out what your army is going to rely on. So are you going to be component heavy? In other words, lots of mechanized, lots of aircraft. You can be supply heavy. So your light infantry, your SAMs. So interestingly enough, SAMs are supply heavy. They don't use components. Are you going to be Air Force heavy? Components and electronics. In my case, I went battle tanks, which are very expensive to research. So lots of rares, lots of components, and electronics. Figure out what's you're going to be heavy on. And then that's where I think you focus your arms industry first, right? So for example, when I was playing this game, supplies are kind of really for everything because they go into research as well. So notice for example, battle tanks, which don't use supply to build, they still required supply to research. So you're going to really need supply no matter what you do, either for your army or for research. But I knew I was going to be component heavy early game because I wanted my battle tanks out immediately. And that's really the only reason I beat this guy was I had my battle tanks. And so I went arms industry on my 2 component cities because I have 2. So I went arms industry 1, arms industry 1, and then I think I went arms industry 1 on my supply area. Okay. And just kind of do it that way, right? Chances are you're not going to be able to do arms industries on all of your cities all at once until later in the game. But early game, prioritize which of these resources you're going to need the most, and then just kind of go from there. Okay. Use the marketplace early and often, particularly on this map, because people quit. The marketplace ends up not getting used really by late early game, to be honest with you. But you're usually going to be money heavy, particularly if you're an aggressive expander early in the game, because again, all these open tiles give you money. So if you need money, expand, and then use your money to buy the resources that you're hungry for until such time as you're, self-reliant. As you can see here, day 24, there's nothing for sale. So I have money to spend that I can't spend. But early game, you won't have that problem. So use your money. You'll find that you can get money back pretty quick. Within like half a day to a day, you can get the money that you need to build the next thing that you need. The resources, though, may take you longer. And you certainly don't want a situation where you have areas that you can build units. Like I have here, I can build a fighter. And I don't have the resources to do it with, right? Which actually, I am going to build a fighter. All right. But yeah, you don't want to stagnate on your builds. You want to hopefully always have somebody in the queue being built. And same thing with your research. You only get 2 research slots. There's like no research slot to get a 3rd research slot. So you obviously want to get these always going as well. And early game, the best way to do that is be buying rares or supplies and use your money to do that. And then if you have surplus of something, sell it on the market. Early game, there'll be people playing who will be buying what you're selling as well. And then as you progress through the game, obviously, less people are playing, and so now the market's not as useful. If you use one of the other maps, may not be the case, but for this map in particular for newbies. It tends to be the case. Then once you get to a point where you have a whole bunch of cash that you don't know what to do with, you start using spies. So you go over to Intel over here. They're expensive. They cost 10,000 per. So for example, I want to put another spy in Raleigh. It cost me 10,000 to recruit him. I only have 12,000 right now. But then you can use him for intel, which is how I'm able to find out that he's only building 2 infantry. That's it. And no research, which tells me I really schwacked him good yesterday, which I'll show you in a moment. But yeah, use intel, like mid game is maybe when you can start doing that. If the market's kind of washed up and you have money to spend. And I won't go over what you can do with that. Those are all self-explanatory. I have counter intel going on down here so that he can't slow down my production, for example, or damage my buildings that I use for production. But also what you can use money for are mercenaries. So these guys are meh. They cost you 200 manpower, daily upkeep, and 500 cash, which is a pretty steep expense for what they do. Level 1 guys are pretty weak. It's not impressive at all. They do okay damage to infantry, 4 or 5, but they're crappy on defense. But what I find them helpful for are 2 things. One, just kind of supplement your ranks if you have cash to burn and it's just sitting there. No point to waste it, right? But then what you can also do is just use them like I am here, where like I don't want to use my line infantry over here because this isn't really a threat. I just really have them here because I have this annexed city kingman that I don't want to lose. And so these guys are more here just to kind of slow somebody down in case there is an actual threat on my annexed city. But otherwise, yeah, it's kind of how I use them. Like Salt Lake City, he's up here. And it's a good way to use them is just to put them where you don't want to actually waste resources, but you don't feel comfortable leaving nobody there, right? The downside with mercenaries, they can't actually conquer land though. So neither can mechanized. So if you're rolling with 1 mechanized, so for example, this guy right here, Texas, he's sitting on my land. That's why I can see him. He's sitting right here, but he can't actually conquer it because he's a mechanized. So you got to have infantry, and mercenaries suffer from that same thing. And then for example here, I don't want to lose this city due to insurgency, which I'll speak to now. So what'll happen is your cities, until they reach about 32 morale, which maybe it's different on other maps, but at least on the American map, if they reach, once they reach about 32 morale, they probably are not going to rebel. Right now, it's subject possibly to insurgency, which means a adverse unit will pop up in the city, and if you don't have a unit here, it'll take over the city. And so you'll lose whatever resources that city is giving you, and then you have to either go take it back or just forget about it, right? So that's what happened here for North Carolina. He didn't have anybody here. The insurgency rose up, and because he didn't have anybody here, he lost the city. So I use these kind of like units that I would never use in combat, like these National Guard guys, which I'll use for defense, but I'm not going to use them for like my spearhead of my attack. Or these mercenary guys to just hold down the fort until morale gets to about 32%, or until the city stops burning, at which time you know it is then safe to vacate that city. It's not going to rebel against you. Good example. Trying to find someone who's just recently. Yeah, I guess these guys have been for a while. But notice this one here, pretty soon this will stop smoking, which means it'll no longer be susceptible to insurgency. And then I can move this person out and move them to another city or start taking over some more land that I feel I need to take out. Okay, we've covered a lot so far. Moving right along. Newspapers. Newspapers are fantastic. Use them. Con news. The wealth of information in here, okay? So we're on day 24. And initially I noticed when I scrolled over here, I was like, because I saw him expanding a lot, and I was like, ooh, I bet he's going to be one of the final guys I got to fight. I saw this port over here, and I was like, huh. And I noticed he's got a level 3 port, which tells me he's building destroyers and or frigates. Also saw he's got a hospital here, so he's kind of doing what I was doing, which I'm going to talk to in a moment. But I saw this port, and I was like, interesting. But I put a spy over here, and I couldn't get intel on what actually he had there. So what I was doing is I was reading the newspapers until I saw that North Carolina had bombarded someone and killed one of their units with their destroyer squadron. I was like, oh yeah, so he's got a destroyer. So you can use this for intel. It tells you all about everything that's going on the map, not just for you, not just for who you're at war with, but also just in general what people are up to. So it gives you a lot of good information on that. Then also for yourself. And then interestingly, so for example, for me, I logged on this morning and I saw that my unit in Baton Rouge had taken some damage, but he was intact. I was like, oh, I wonder what happened. So what I did was I went back to day 23 and I torched him. And it didn't tell me where this all happened at, obviously, but I knew where it happened at because my units had taken some damage in Baton Rouge. And what he had done was I don't know if this is something he did, like he did what I'm not going to do tonight, right? I'm not going to move on his hometown stuff tonight. I'm going to wait till tomorrow morning. Right now I'm just turtling up because I don't want to walk into a meat grinder. But he sent all these guys to Baton Rouge, lost them all, and including all his fighters, because I have a upgraded SAM anti-air units that are pretty good against air superiority fighters. So, and then these guys I took out with my bombers overnight. And so it's just a really good way to kind of find out either what happened if you were away and things happened, or just find out what happened on the battlefield for the other countries. And you can also go up here and write an article. So, you could write an article being like, hey, I'm Mexico and I'm looking for a coalition with anybody who's interested, DM me, or whatever you want to put up here. You can use this for that and it'll show up in here as an article. Otherwise, if you go to diplomacy, you can do the same thing. I could, for example, North Carolina, butterfly poop. I could send him a DM and talk to him that way. Okay. And I may have already mentioned it. I apologize for repeating myself. If you're new to the game, do a coalition. It'll just make the game easier for you. The best way to do a coalition is either form one up and then just reach out to people, DM them. Look for people who are active in the game. So if you see someone expanding out, like say Colorado, like, hey bro, you want to form a coalition? And eventually you'll find somebody or two people that are interested. And on this map in particular, you really only need one other decent player who's active. That's the most important thing, active. And you should be okay. Okay, hospitals. I recommend you have at least one level 5 hospital, at least one, because what they do is you'll find units heal up really slow in this game. Okay, so for example, this is the unit that got hit up in Baton Rouge this morning. So it's been over 12 hours and they haven't really healed up at all. They were like 216 and like 218, which this is a lot of health points for a unit. It's because I have a 10 stack. So 10 stacks are going to be, it is a 10 stack because I pulled these guys off, but anything more than 10 in a stack, you're going to get penalties. Aircraft, anything more than 5, by the way. So, but they're healing up really slow, and that's pretty consistent with all the units in the game. So what you do is you park them at a hospital, and for a level 5 hospital, you get a bonus 5 HP for every 24 hours, right? And they also help with population growth too, by the way. So they're good for your economy because as your city gets bigger, you get more resources from them. But so in this case, I have my bombers hanging back here, getting healed back up before I send them up to the front tomorrow morning, up against North Carolina. So have a level 5 hospital. It's worth the investment. Makes your people happy, and it helps your units heal up good. Well, I don't think there's a stacking penalty for hospitals, so you could get away with just one. Maybe if you're concerned about losing one, or if you want one closer to the front, you can either build one in a forward city, or you can even build one on a construction tile. For these field hospitals, it's the same rate of healing. Okay. Just know that if someone takes over one of your cities, unless they manually destroy things, like here he had a barracks here, I destroyed it. If it's in a land tile, it just it gets destroyed upon conquest by the other player. Use air bases. So air bases are really good for land. So for example, I'm building one here in Atlanta, and what they do is they allow units that have the capacity for airlift to travel much more rapidly than by land. So let's take, for example, National Guard. This guy has airlift capability. What does that mean? It means instead of having to go like this across land all the way to where I'm going, or across sea to where I'm going, say I want to go to Baton Rouge. Instead of having to go by land all the way over there, I just go to Mexico City, which has an airport, right? To Baton Rouge. See that green line? That's saying that he's going to fly from Mexico City to Baton Rouge. So really huge. Use airports. They're very, very helpful. But, make sure that the unit that you want to airlift can actually airlift. So for example, these SAMs, unlike the anti-air, which I'll get to in a moment, they can't airlift until like they're level 4, I think. Let's see here. It's right here. Right, so I've got to upgrade them 1, 2, 3 times. So level 4 to get airlift. You see right here? No airlift. Airlift. So I build them down here, and then he's got to do this long trek all the way by land over here, right? Same with the battle tank. So my battle tanks are super sexy. They are. They're super sexy. I have not played main battle tanks before, so that's why I did it this game. I can see why they're a controversial unit, and I'll get to that in a moment. But you want to make sure that the units that you have can use airlift capability, because the maps are big. Even this map, right, is big in terms of travel, and it just takes forever if you go by land. Your overall force is not flexible to responding to differing challenges on the battlefield and differing threats. For all I know, he's got his entire force sailing down to Mexico City right now. And if that's the case, my battle tanks aren't getting back there because they cannot airlift. So basically, I'm going to have to send my infantry, and that's it. And my recon vehicles are the only ones that have airlift, because even my SAMs don't have airlift, right? I'm not so worried about that, because the last couple days I've annihilated his fleet. I've sunk about 7 of his ships, and I've caught several of his ships coming down through here using my my AWAC. He actually, it was funny. The war got started because he shot down one of my AWACs. It really pissed me off. But my AWAC's been able to tip me off to all this stuff, and now I'm not so worried about it. Given what he's building, I think I'm poised to crush him here in a second. But famous last words, right? But yeah, airlift is really huge. Really helps. All you need is you need an air base at point A and point B. It doesn't have to be in a city. It can be like I have here. I built this little airfield in the middle of nowhere because my air fleet couldn't really reach past Baton Rouge, and I was moving out of Baton Rouge today, so I wanted to make sure I could provide air cover to my stacks, because I saw all those fighter jets that I had destroyed, but I didn't know what else he had aircraft wise, even though I have, as you can see, an AA embedded. But I believe this is my point to the AA, going over anti-air versus SAMs. Yeah, they have airlift after you level up to level 4 as well, but they're cheaper and you can do it sooner, right? So I have to wait till day 16 before I can get this. This is day 11 and it's cheaper. So that's the first thing with air bases. Another nice thing with air bases is they boost your resource production. So that's kind of an added benefit that you wouldn't even necessarily think of. So my rares are getting a plus 20% bonus because I have a level 4 air base here. So not only do I have an increased population bonus from my hospital, but I also have a resource bonus. So you can strategically put air bases in your home bases as well, right? So if you say, hey, I know I only want 2 home bases to have airports right now. Well, I'm component heavy. So why not put my air bases in my component city? That way I can boost production of that, right? Just think of it that way. For me, early game, I needed, that's right, you could freaking destroy it. It's so annoying. I needed supply, so that's why I went ahead and put my air base down here. But just realize there's that benefit. And then last but not least, for your Air Force, what you want to do with your air bases is you want your rings to touch. So let's see here. Where's my fighter jets? Oh crap, he's going back to refuel. Where you at, Bo? Okay, so see here, this ring. Now this ring's a little bit bigger than you start off with because I've upgraded him a couple times. But what you want to do is your air bases want to basically touch these rings. So I should have an air base in Odessa based on this concept, right? The whole idea being is that anywhere that you might need your Air Force, they can reach, right? So right now, where my guys are at, they can't actually reach Odessa. And so what you want to do is you want to have another air base either in Odessa or like I have Monterey, which is close enough, right? That might work. But just know that, just kind of have that in mind, that you just want to make sure that you can get your air fleet to wherever you need it. That being said, I mean, if you're using bombers, dude, bombers are nuts. Check that out. I mean, it's crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So I think it's like, that's 1,500 square miles they can go. Whereas these upgraded fighters are like 600, I believe. So yeah. Okay, moving right along here. One mistake that I've seen people make is, for example, like up here in Minnesota, this guy went and rolled on Wisconsin, but he didn't take his cities. Now, occupied cities, that's fine, because like for this guy, he can't build troops in his occupied cities unless he's annexed them. That's why I went after Atlanta first. But it makes no sense whatsoever for me to move on Asheville and Charlotte, for example, and just go around them. And go around Greensboro and go around Fayetteville. Because unless and until these cities are conquered by me and I destroy all the stuff in them, he's still getting these resources every day. He's still getting these resources. It's not like he's choked off like this is Stalingrad. He's still getting these resources. He can still build stuff. And so go for the cities first, the homeland cities, the annexed cities. Then go for the occupied cities and the surrounding land and whatnot. Okay. Just this thing never made sense to me. I don't know why people do it. It's almost like it's like the easy way out, but they forget that, well, they can build stuff at the city. It's these land tiles don't do much for you. They don't give you much. They just give you money. That's it. That's all they do. So, and occasionally some resources like this place here, which is giving 109 components in an entire day. Whereas I'm producing 338 an hour. All right. Don't forget about officers, which I forgot about officers this game. So there you go. Now it's hard, right? Because you only have two research slots. I spread myself a little thin. I thought I was going to actually have a little bit more time to prepare for this war with this guy. And so I had to scramble for cruise missiles, which takes a couple of research. You got to research your guided missile program. Then you got to research ballistic just to get down a cruise. But once you get cruise, you can launch these things at infrastructure and enemy players, units from your aircraft. So that's why I'm building these. But you really want to try and get officers if you can. So I would have really liked the tank commander, for example, which to research, they're super cheap. Okay. They take about a day and 8 hours to research, but they're cheap to research, but super expensive to build. Right. So if you're going to burn a research spot on these guys, kind of have a plan in place to where you can build one as soon as they're ready to go. Because otherwise it's kind of a wasted research spot, right? If you research them and then you just never build one and put them on the field. Also know they take an army base level 3, so make sure you have that, and a recruiting office level 2. But they are uber, right? I'm not just talking the tank commander, I'm talking any commander. So first off, just the unit itself does 10 damage to infantry. This is just level 1, and 12 damage to hard. Let's put that in perspective. 10 and 12, that's a level 1 tank commander. 10 and 12. Let's take mechanized, which are the better infantry. Still, fully upgraded advanced mechanized infantry aren't that good, right? So that's just level 1 tank commander. But infantry, again, a little bit different, right? But you're going to give bonuses to infantry, which I'll go over this guy in a second too, just really fast, because I don't want to belabor the point on this. But what they also do is they provide bonuses to the actual stack as well. So for example, for armor, or looks like for infantry, you get plus 15% speed. And then for tanks, plus 20% attack, plus 10% defense, and plus 15% speed, right? So they speed up the entire stack by 15%, which, you know, I was just complaining about how slow my battle tanks are. It would have been smart of me to build a tank commander for my battle tanks. I'll do that next time if I go with battle tanks. And you only get one per though, right? So you get one tank commander, one infantry commander, so forth, so on. And then put in perspective, infantry commander, again, really expensive to build, not as bad as a tank commander, but still very expensive to build. And then what they do is they give your infantry plus 15 attack and defense, plus 15 speed, and then plus 15 to your tanks, right? So they can actually benefit your tanks as well. And then you just upgrade these guys like you do any other unit. But really good to have. I should have had it. And that gets me to talking on the battle tank. So I hadn't played the battle tank before, the main battle tank. So I wanted to do it this game. And I can see why it's a controversial unit. First off, it is a sexy unit. It is beefy. It packs a punch. I am currently upgrading it to level 4, I believe. Yep. So let's look at the level 4 battle tank, assuming I have it right. 11 infantry, 10 to tanks, and it's got 50 hit points. So it's uber. Now you do get a little bit of decrease on urban warfare, but you're really good in open ground. So if you're playing a country that's in like North Africa, where it's a lot of desert, or just like the Middle East, the main battle tank would be awesome, right? Jungles is terrible. You get all these negative modifiers, but just know that they have a ton of hit points, right? So they can take a lot of damage. Pay attention to this, where they sit up in the front line. This means that they're going to take the brunt of the damage. So that means that they would work well with other units that are like middle or rear, right? So if you have a great rear unit, like my SAMs, for example, coupling them with your battle tanks means your SAMs aren't going to really take any damage, and your tanks are going to take the brunt, right? They're going to soak up a lot of that damage. But the downside is they're freaking slow. Like they're decent speed in open ground, but otherwise they're slow as heck. Like mountains, they basically don't even move. Jungle, they barely move. And then urban and cities, they're pretty slow, right? And they don't really get a whole lot faster, because like, as you can see here, I've got the engine upgrade, and that's how fast they're moving right now. So that's the first major downside to the battle tanks, is they're slow. Number 2, they don't get airlift until, in my case, day 25, which, bear in mind, I'm not going to go into it in this video, but do know that doctrines play a role in this game and how you probably should play. So I'm the Europeans, and based on that, different units have different hit points, and you can build them sooner in the tech train. So I think for Europeans, I think their strength was, maybe it was the main battle tank. But just know that they don't get airlift until way out here. So not only are they slow, but they don't get airlift until like day 25. And so basically, like I was saying earlier, if he makes an attack on my homeland, I've got like 1 or 2 tanks back there, and that's it. So my tanks are not going to be getting back there to help me out defending my homeland. Like they're committed to North Carolina at this point, right? And then the last downside is, not only are they expensive to research, they're expensive to build. Okay, so let's put it in perspective here. Research: 2,800 supply, 3,200 rare. The armored fighting vehicle, which is more mobile and is the I think I'd probably say the preferred battle tank, or I don't say battle tank, preferred tank that people like to use. 2,600 versus 28, but a lot less rares than this here. 600 less rares, and as you'll see from rares, they're harder to ramp up than components and supplies. So significantly cheaper to research the armored fighting vehicle versus the main battle tank. And then last but not least, they're expensive to build. So if we were to go build a battle tank, you're talking 2,000 components for one tank and 950 electronics, versus an armored fighting vehicle, which bear in mind, these get more expensive as you upgrade them, but only 1,600 components and 650 electronics. So, and this guy here does 7 and 5 damage. So serviceable, right? And they get airlift much sooner. So that's the main battle tank. I ramped my economy knowing the battle tanks were going to be the spear of my attack and were expensive as heck to not only build but research. So I actually have got a pretty robust amount of them now. I've got 2 here. So I got 5, 6, 8, and then I think I have 2 back at home. So I got a lot of battle tanks, but they're really expensive. And if I lose them, that's hard to replace. Okay, enough about the tanks. But one unit that I would highlight, and I highly advocate that you use them in every game, and I'm going to start using them in every game, is the combat recon vehicle. Now, this is a beginner unit that you start off with that I was talking about earlier, where if you do a stack of like a couple infantry and 1 combat recon vehicle, it's a great start. Upgrade them to level 2. But they have a couple additional benefits that are really good mid to late game when you have a lot of territory to cover. First off, they have air assault. Now, how is air assault different than airlift? Well, you don't need like a runway to take them and drop them off. So if you upgrade them to air assault and then say upgrade them to the next level vehicle, that is a fairly tanky, against infantry, and they can somewhat hold their own against tanks, but good response to someone who's maybe hitting you with infantry on a front that you didn't expect. So very, very versatile unit. Highly recommend. And they're not very expensive to build. For example, this guy here is only going to cost you 1,200 supply and 1,100 components. So not 2,000 components, right? But it's going to cost you some supply. But that's for a level 4 armored unit, right? That also has versatility and mobility. And if you couple it with your special forces unit, these guys, level 1, have air assault and air lift as well, obviously, but air assault. And these guys are also very good against soft units and can hold their own somewhat against or against tanks. Now, by no means are you going to be able to use recon vehicles and special forces against main battle tanks, for example. But someone hitting you with infantry and recon vehicles, yeah, I think it would be a good thing. And at a minimum, what you can do is you can use them to slow the advance until you can get yourself in a position to deal with it either with your Air Force or what have you. Okay. All right, this has already gone long. Let me see if I've got anything else in my notes to speak to. I think I covered everything. Sweet. Bombers rock. Love the bombers. Use those guys more often. And then just one final note. It's just something I've learned. AWACS are pretty good. They're okay. Okay, so they don't pick up on infantry. Like you gotta be right on top of someone to pick up on infantry. So they're really good for picking up naval vessels. That's how I was able to hunt down all his navy, was with my AWACS. And in armor, they're good for that. Or if his aircraft was coming in, but they're not good for infantry. So I would say couple it with UAV. I think that's a good mix and match. Is go ahead and build some UAV. UAV is super cheap. Not only cheap to research, but then cheap to build. But they're like paper. So I shot down, I don't know how many of his UAVs at the start of the war. Because they don't have a very long sight range early on. You got to keep upgrading them. But they're cheap to build, so you can put out a lot of them. And what's nice is that you can put them over an enemy territory and you don't start war, which is also cool. And then as you upgrade them, they even get the ability to shoot cruise missiles, which is kind of cool. So you can use them both for intel gathering and assault, which is cool. So I just noticed that difference. I don't know how I quite feel about the AWACS, because not only do you have to research them, with the research isn't the problem. It's they require a level 4 airbase. So I think the better fix is to go UAV to start. And then if you want to pivot over to AWACS a little bit later in the game when you can afford it, great. But early to even mid game, a level 4 airbase is pretty pricey just to have like an intel gathering plane that is slow And unless you upgrade it, you can't really maximize what it's built for. Like, this really isn't that big a range. Like, the war started because I picked up his fighters coming in, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get out of here because he declared war on me. And he caught me in like 2 seconds, you know, because I couldn't see him coming. This ring is not very big. So I found they're helpful right now when I have fighter protection. That's why I was scrambling to get these fighters back here. But otherwise, yeah, I think these guys are better used later game when you can upgrade their potential and make better use of their capabilities. So I think they're probably best used for detecting navies, honestly. They seem pretty vulnerable over land just because that's where the air bases are and the air superiority aircraft are at. All right. I think that covers everything. So if you guys, anything else you want to add, please go ahead and throw it in the comments section. Any questions that you have, you know, I'll try and catch them and respond accordingly. If you found this informative and it's either helped your playthrough or attracted you to the game and you started playing the game, great. Please, leave a like. That'll let other people know that it's worth watching. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel, it helps people find the channel. And we obviously really just do this because we have an audience of people who want it. So we deeply appreciate you guys. And with that, have an absolutely fantastic day.